Hello and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Someone just sent a kind note saying, it's amazing that you're making these long trips to the other side of the world. I've only done it once, but you probably know how to go the quickest and most comfortable way. Uh, the answer to that is the quickest and most comfortable way is your inner state. So uh, the distance or the time or the place, the content of the situation of our circumstance is always changing. It's never what we want it to be for very long, even if it ever is. And being okay with that is the secret to, making long trips and making every situation, every circumstance, um, not just acceptable, but pleasant and intriguing and curious and inspiring. It's the awareness of what's happening, not the happening itself, that is the key to moving through life in the most fluid and the most co-creative way. Outside of that, if our mood is dependent on our environment, then we're just at the mercy of all these things that constantly change, that constantly shift, that if we have a preconceived notion of what should be, then we're comparing what is happening to what we think should be happening. And this is where most, if not all, of the friction in our life comes from. There's so much detail to be found in every environment. And really, detail is what presence is, to be seeing what you're seeing, to actually hear what you're hearing, feel what you're feeling, taste what you're tasting. Um, that pulls us into that present moment. And it's like that's what our senses are for. We have five senses and they're meant to engage with the world around us. They're the glue that keeps us present. And the more we are actually sensing our senses, the more we are present, the more we are completely engaged and plugged in to the reality. And that is the objective reality. That is not a subjective reality seen through the lens of what we want to have happen, but rather the objective reality of what's happening, and we get to be part of that. We get to play with that. We get to co-create with that. We get to feel that flowing through us and have our experience, our skills, our personality, that the human part of us, the little human, gets to play. But it's never without losing perspective of our from our higher self. It's the higher self that gives everything the healthy distance, if you will, to engage with the world in a most meaningful way. So it's not just about self, it's not just about me, but it's about what's right for the situation. What wants to happen here? What wants to become form? There's a dream that's being dreamt, and the formless wanting to take shape. And one of the most amazing conduits for that is us. It gets to dream through us and make things real for a time. It's the arising and passing of form. We are part of that arising and passing of form. Any part that we cling to about ourselves slows that down, interferes with that arising and passing, with that flow. So that flow state is always there. It's being fully engaged. It's allowing things to be as they are. In fact, one of the chapters today that I was thinking of reading was about acceptance. And So with that, welcome to Beyond the Book. We've got books here. And before we begin, we want to honor that which all of these books and everything that we create and everything that comes to us comes from. And that is best described as stillness. It's our relationship to stillness. We can be still in our environment, with nothing happening, supposedly. Then we find that stillness within ourselves, and that provides the context to our doing. We're just doing without having something to juxtapose it with to give it a framework. Then we'll find ourselves doing forever, chasing forever, seeking forever. And there's nothing to tell us, well, do I really need to be doing this? Do I really need to be saying this? Do I need to break the juiciness of the stillness? Because that's what it ultimately is. It's just this beautiful stillness. So even there, we can't get too attached to it because we're here to do what we're here to do with perspective, with a healthy relationship towards the doing that which wants to be done, as opposed to what we feel like we need in order to feel safe or heard or respected or accomplished, successful, all these things that the little me, little human always calls for that. If there's nothing to give that context, then we're kind of in that stressful situation where we feel very small and alone, like we're up against a scary world. And that's because we get really, really small when we're just identified with our thoughts. Literally, every thought that comes along about the me, about what should happen, about controlling, that's a thought. And if we identify with it, we get really small. And if we keep identifying with every single thought that comes along, we stay in that really small place. And it's just an anxious place. It's a unforgiving place. It's a soul crushing place. There's not enough breathing room to connect to the aliveness of the formless wanting to take shape through us. Nothing can flow through us when we're just in that mind identified place. So we can live life from mind identification, anxious, fearful, small, controlling, steering, non present, or we can live life from higher self, from the awareness of things, from relationship to stillness, from allowing, accepting, surrender. Ooh. So we're going to talk about many of those things today. Before we begin, we're going to honor that stillness, as I just said, and just continue talking. And just take 2 minutes. That's all it takes. Even just a few moments, a few seconds throughout the day to connect and reconnect to that stillness. Makes a big difference. Reminds us what's really going on, who's really in charge, what we're here to do, why there are so-called obstacles that present themselves. And with awareness, we start to see the deeper meaning, deeper truth, the felt resonance of things, not the mental evaluation and comparison and that's always colored by fear and control and lack, but rather the deeper resonance of what is this pointing to? What am I here to learn? What is this asking of me? So 2 minutes of silence. Well done. I almost don't want to come back to talking. It really isn't that hard. And even if we're surrounded by noise, it's a very noisy world. There's moments of stillness throughout the day that we can find. There's moments of stillness in everyday situations, waiting in line. There's a lot of waiting, waiting for a web page to load, waiting in traffic for the elevator, for everyone to arrive at the meeting, for our devices to charge. There's the writing software that I use started getting overwhelmed when I was writing Old Soul, Young Soul, because it's a 600-page book and the software was starting to take its time while it was saving and loading. And it had this little spinner while it was saving, and that would just pop up randomly now and then towards the end of the book. And I never knew for how long it would sit there and spin sometimes because it depended on internet connection. Sometimes it would take longer, sometimes not so long. And it would interrupt whatever I was doing, the flow I was in. And even there, I became enamored with being present with the spinning timer and to use it as a continuation of the flow, not an interruption. And such is everything in life. We can experience it as interruption if we're oriented a particular way, if the mind identified state rules us, if the little human is driving, or we can see it as more opportunity to stay aware, to stay in our awareness. The awareness of the content is much more important than the content itself. And I mentioned the word healthy distance earlier. We can all relate to relationships or creative pursuits or work endeavors, anything really. If we're too close to it, if we're too identified with it, if we're pushing too hard, then it never feels right. Things start going off track. The flow starts to slow down and come to a creaking halt. We start to lose the bigger picture. We start taking people for granted. We start blaming ourselves for not being good enough or creative enough. All of this comes from being too close to something. And when we're really, really close to something, that is the mind identified state, the believing of our thoughts. Every thought that comes along, just believing it and letting it rule us. And a big source, the biggest source of these thoughts, because that's always a question that comes up, are our unresolved feelings. These unfinished emotions that we were experiencing something at one point and then we reacted to how we felt. That's the signal chain of how things work. Something in our environment, we interpret a particular way that shows up as sensation in the body, and then we react to that sensation. And that reaction is what keeps that sensation from completing. It keeps it stuck. If it were to complete, it would leave, it would dissolve again, it would come and go. Feelings come and go, they arise and pass. But when we react to our feelings, which is a mental reaction, mental judgment, then that interrupts the feeling from completing. And now we have layers and layers of unfinished sensations, unfinished emotions in our body. And then the mind at some level is always looking to fix that, to close the loop, to look all around and where can I do something about this? Because we're just full of this tension, full of this unresolved issues layer. And many, many thoughts generate from that space. So, again, one of the big themes of today and every day and every moment of every day of every life is acceptance. And that is not mental acceptance, not a reframing, it's not positive thinking, but that's allowing yourself to feel your feelings fully, accepting how you feel in this moment. That's what keeps those feelings from getting stuck. That's what keeps the energy flowing. That's how we stay in sync with life. That's how we get to be ready for each moment, be in receiving mode, see it for what it is without distorting it through the lens of the past or expectations of the future. It all comes down to that, to the ability to feel as you feel right now, without amplification, without isolating that moment and making it into something that it isn't, just based on past conditioning. And then past conditioning is mostly the stuff that we inherited from our ancestors, who themselves didn't get a chance to resolve anything. They were busy doing other things. Circumstances didn't allow, but those of us who are here, fortunate enough to come in contact with environments that are not provided naturally in mainstream life, we have to find to them ourselves, usually through things like burnout or anxiety, depression, things like there must be a better way to living life than constantly chasing outcomes. You do that a few times, and most everyone realizes, oh, this, whatever I achieved, it was great for a moment, for a minute. And then life continues. And so do you invest chasing another thing, sometimes for years or even decades, only to have a brief glimpse of happiness, achievement, a moment where that which you were promised is here, and then it leaves us again. The better way is something that we have to find ourselves because it's not given to us automatically. And that is life too, is that it creates these situations of contrast. And that the contrast is what gives the the meaninglessness gives light to the meaning. The darkness gives light to the light. The feeling lost and rudderless and disoriented gives light to being able to find direction and feel what it's like to be on a path that resonates. Most of the things we experience in life do not resonate. And they all point to that which does. So we can't want anything to be away. We don't can't want this situation to be different. We don't can't want it to be gone. We it's all there for a reason. And when we start to see life in this way, that there's this incredible design to life, an intelligence, if you want to call it that, and it's bringing us gifts all the time. Every situation contains a gift. It's a reflection of who we are. It's happening for a reason. And it's not just saying, oh, everything happens for a reason just because of as a surface statement. No, that reason is you. That reason is your lens, how you see things, and it's being reflected back to us all the time in the way we view life, in the way we view the world. So we're all experiencing our own little world of us. of who we are. And you're going to have to face whatever's contained in that world, whatever's contained in you. And some of those things might not be pleasant. Some of those things might be pleasant. But again, they work together. Most of the things that Carl Jung has a great quote. Most of the things we struggle with are the unlived life of our parents and ancestors. And we're the lucky ones to put a stop to that, to feel like, well, I'm just not no longer going to blindly repeat these patterns that have been there for generations. And we don't have to go back very far to have deep trauma, impactful experiences in our lineages. It's there. There's war, there's famine, there's mental illness, there's abuse. It's all there, and somebody somewhere along the line has to say stop. The buck stops here. So we are those lucky ones, not just getting to heal ourselves, but really healing the generational, the piled up, stuck emotions that have been passed along. Epigenetics shows how there's switches on DNA that get activated by the environment and just continue on, get passed along. So almost every book I've written contains a chapter on black sheep. Maybe we can read that one today. And that is this initial identity where we find ourselves at odds with our environment, feeling like we're different from everyone else, that we're not okay with the status quo for very long. We may start out there. Everyone kind of starts out there. Everyone forgets our essence, our spiritual roots. And that's okay. And that's also part of the finding back to the path, is getting off the path, losing ourselves, so that when we return with awareness, not just, again, blindly following even a beneficial idea or concept, but rather understanding why it's beneficial, feeling why it's beneficial. It's all about felt resonance. And when that becomes our guidance system, then we become what I call unconditional in the most beautiful, healthy, balanced way, in that we are no longer willing to compromise our truth, our resonance. All confidence, all worth, all peace, all calm, all creativity flows from that place. We can't create anything new from what we know. Full stop. What we know is what we're hanging on to mentally from the past. And we're just using those ingredients to try and create. We're going to get dried up pretty quick. We're going to hit a wall and get creative block. It's just when we're in our heads about something, trying to draw from what we already know, what we trust, what we think is safe, what we cling to, our attachments, the stories that we've created of me, this whole belief structure that sits on top of a control grid that the mind creates, all in the effort to keep us safe. It's not a bad thing, but if that's our dominant operating system, then we're just going to experience constant validation, constant comparison, constant fear. Something might go wrong, fear of the future, which is our life. We become fearful of our own life when we're in our heads. So writing, anyone here, and most here have attended a workshop or heard me speak before or read some of the books, and And writing is just one of the golden activities where stuff that has been floating in our head starts to crystallize. Speaking is another way to put scrutiny to something, because when thoughts are just in our head, the monkey mind just jumps around branch to branch. And when things stay in the head, stay unexpressed, they morph and distort in unbelievable ways. You could reach the point where you no longer want to exist just from believing our thoughts and being in our head. But writing is the most powerful, I find, because you have the tactile element. So, by the way, keyboard, almost no neurons fire when we're using that. Pen and paper, 1,000% more neurons fire, something like that. And so there's a groundedness, there's a flow of energy that comes from us and leaves us into through the pen and onto the paper and onto the surface, into the ground. It's a grounding activity. And it forces you to apply scrutiny to something. So you don't have to write entire books. That's not how anyone started out. That's not how I started out. The books came as a result of journaling. And the journaling you can think of as taking out the trash, an opportunity to stay connected to your body, how the words activate you. This, by the way, was a game changer. I spent years journaling and it was okay. I always felt a little forced and always felt a little mental till somebody pointed out that the connection shouldn't be between the mind and what you're writing, but between the words and how they make you feel. I've shared, I'm sure with many here, the journaling exercise, any numerous ones that I have, audio recordings, I can post that after the call, of using journaling as a way to notice activation in the body about something that's happened, something that's been on one's mind. And then the moment you feel activation in the body, you put down the pen and you can close your eyes and reflect on, where do I feel this? And stay with that sensation, observe it, locate it, observe it, notice it, look at its shape, its size, its color. Some people say, uh, give it a name. What does it represent? Different types of somatic practices. But ultimately, you want to stay with the sensation and see it through fully. Let the body feel it fully, for it to leave and dissolve, and not for the mind to interfere and react to it. That's what keeps it stuck. And the amazing thing is, when feelings are allowed to complete, they leave behind an imprint of wisdom, of resonance. This resonates, so I'm going to follow that. And this doesn't resonate, so I don't need to follow that. No negotiation, no trying to mentally analyze things. It's an instant knowing. And the more we practice that, the more pronounced that is, the more fluidly we move through life situations, big situations, small situations, and just we move by resonance. So this is what writing does. It really articulates and helps us strengthen our awareness muscle of how we feel. Highly recommend it. And the same thing happens when we're reading, ideally paper books still, because of that grounded effect it has, grounding effect. That we're getting to reflect in a way on where this shows up in our body, what we're reading. The scribbles that we put in the books often, that's a form of writing and journaling and reflecting and going deeper and making it a felt experience. So we're really here to feel, which is such a beautiful thing if you think about it. We're here to feel our feelings fully, our humanness fully, our aliveness fully, to be engaged, to be present with things as they're happening, to lend ourselves as a conduit for the things to happen through us, to not be constantly getting in the way of life, and then having things happen that are so much more diverse and different and creative and detailed than anything we could ever imagine. You could try and sit there and imagine all day long, and nothing compares to when something is real. There's an energy of realness, of aliveness that can't be replicated other than by living, by being here, by making ourselves available to the moment. The moment does not have to be spectacular. It does not have to be some emotional high. In fact, the beauty is in the quietness and the stopping to smell the roses. A lot of these things are in mainstream culture through these little phrases that we often say, what you resist persists. There's gold in these sayings, but we have to see the deeper meaning. So with that, I'm going to reach for Be You, the journey of self-realization. And it took me 2 years to write this one. Now I've got it down to 3 to 4 months. But a lot of that has to do with accepting what comes through us. Not structure, not outlining, not some kind of format or even writing software. That all, once that's in place, it helps. But it's mainly just allowing what wants to come through in exactly the shape that it wants to express itself. You can start getting, looking at formatting and cleaning things up later down the road at subsequent passes, but most of the writing is done by being in that flow state and not worrying about grammar, not worrying about what others might think, not worrying about what if this isn't a success, not worrying about what else you could be doing right now. All of this is just interference. And again, that interference happens. There could be sitting somebody next to you at the cafe that you're writing at, and they're loud on the phone, or they've got toxic energy or whatever it may be, and you need to be able to allow all of that. You change your seat, of course, but don't have it throw you off. And the awareness of that actually keeps you in the flow state. Nothing can penetrate your energy field if you stay aware. Stay aware of everything. And it's not so much about protection, but it's about staying open to what wants to come through us, staying in flow state. That's what being aware is. That's what our connection to our aliveness is. And that's what sensation awareness is that things are actually happening when we're in an aware state and life is flowing through us and we're in receiving mode and we're conduits for the formless to take shape through. Things are happening in our bodies, sensations. They can come from inspiration, they can come from ideas taking shape, they can come from feeling triggered, feeling challenged. But whatever is coming out, we need to pause for a moment and work it through before we can continue writing because there's a new felt truth that's arrived. And these are all beautiful things. These are the human experience. And when we can see it that, and our orientation is as such, to recognize that we're here to learn, we're here to grow, we're here to work through the discomforts, to face and confront the shadow sides so that we can then know what it light looks like. That's what we're here for. And that's why life keeps on, seemingly annoying us. It wants us to grow. It wants us to come out of the anxiousness of the mind identified state. It hurts to be so small. It makes us depressed to be so controlling and fearful that we don't know what's going to happen. The unknown is our greatest creative partner. And to be afraid of the unknown and fearful of what it might bring, it's just the mind identified state. We do not have to fear that ever. We show up and we learn to respond to what's there. Everyone can do that. And that is far simpler than the controlling, steering, judging, negotiating, comparing, analyzing approach. That one is the complicated one. That's the one that leads to mental and physical unwellness. That's the one where we start to feel stuck and listless and bored and like we don't know what we're here to do. When our entire beingness is our purpose. When we're living in these, inhabiting these machines, these resonance machines that are here to engage and feel and convey and translate and transmute all the vibrational states, all the frequencies, all the resonance of moving through this three-dimensional space. There's no boredom to be found in that. In fact, it's when we're really clued in, when we're really in receiving mode, then there's almost too much creativity, too many ideas. We still have the limitations of our physical body. We need to eat and sleep and rest and get some chores done. We can't be in ultra creative mode all day, all night. But that's a good problem to have, right? Then you can choose your top two or three and move those forward. And the connection to those and the guidance and the energy that there's a vast ocean of energy behind that type of inspiration, those types of downloads, that type of guidance, that we can get so much more done. We can be so much more productive. We are so much more efficient. We are so much more creative. We're so much more alive. Who wouldn't want that? We are here to do, but we are here to do in a certain way, a particular connected way. If we're doing from control and fear and avoidance or compensation, then that feels a certain way, doesn't feel good, wears us down. But if we do in the connected state, then we are limitless. And there's really just who we are in our physical being that needs to be nurtured, that needs to be taken care of. Thank you for the emojis that are flying. And that's where self-care is really, really important. Knowing ourselves. And that's what this book, coming back to that, is really about. I had read so many texts or watched so many talks about the journey to self-realization. And it always struck me as, well, then that feels like just another outcome. Now we're just chasing in the spiritual realm, but that's still chasing, trying to achieve some state, trying to get to bliss or calm or enlightenment. No different than chasing a job title, an income, a house, status. We're all trying to feel a certain way and chasing that feeling. That's where we miss out on right now. So I decided to call this the journey of self-realization. There's the of. And that points to the fact that everything is part of the journey, that every moment is an opportunity to be more aware, to practice developing a stronger awareness muscle, to live less in the mind identified state and more from sensation awareness, to learn to really be alive to in our fullest, to feel our feelings in their fullest. And by the way, that does not mean that we should feel overwhelmed ever. There's this idea that, oh, if I let myself feel all my feelings, that it'll just be too much. When you start to do the work in this space, the inner work, and you start to really get close and intimate with what's really going on there, you'll realize very quickly that 95% of the emotional charge comes from our reaction to the feeling, not the feeling itself. All our feelings, there's a few, grave uh, feelings, can be traumatizing feelings that can happen, but most of our feelings, natural feelings, are just wavelets. And it's our constant reaction to that that's keeping us out of the present moment, that's keeping us out of the flow, that's keeping us disconnected from our own aliveness. That blurs our vision and distracts us from seeing the detail, from connecting through our senses, from resting in our awareness of the things instead of getting attached and identified with the things. So the journey of self-realization is really it points to that every moment, every single moment, there's no exception to this, is an opportunity to live more from awareness. When you're pouring yourself a cup of coffee, something as mundane as that, you can be aware of the aroma, the fragrance, the mug that you're holding, the heat, temperature, and take that in its fullness. Be present with that. Or you could be thinking about your to-do list and what happens next, and or what you think will happen next, and you miss out on this experience, and you're disconnected, and you're in your head, you're not in the flow, and you're focusing on lack, what you haven't yet done, and projecting into the future of what might happen. That's where it gets complicated. Even just talking about it gets complicated so quickly. But the simplicity of being with that cup of coffee, nothing complicated. And it's pleasant. The main reason you're pouring it is hopefully because it tastes good, not because you're doing it rushed to get a kick so that you can, because you're tired, so you can get through the next meeting. So, and that too then starts to infuse that awareness, that connectedness starts to infuse truth, felt truth into your actions. Why am I pouring this cup of coffee? Why is it, do I really need 3 or 4 or 5 cups? What am I compensating for? Does this really feel good? That awareness will balance out and bring healthy uh, relationships into one's life with everything, people, places, and things. And it becomes the guiding GPS all on its own, all through awareness and felt resonance. And we try so hard to fix ourselves, and we from the outside in and join these programs and that tell you to do something 26 days in a row, whatever. It's possible, but it's really hard to change yourself from the outside in. And even if you kind of get it for a while, you might easily fall back and it doesn't really stick as well. but changing from the inside out is permanent. There's many different variations on lessons. Sometimes it feels like we haven't learned a lesson. We thought we'd fixed it 10 years ago or got wise, and then it comes back in some different shape, some variation, and we might feel like we didn't really learn our lesson. It's just because there's another variation on that. Life really, really, really wants us to weed out every last, look under every little rock of our being, see if there's any shadow left, and bring the light of awareness to every nook and cranny in our being. And then how we apply ourselves from that place changes everything. Changes how you view work, relationships, our need for nature, um, the decisions we make, both big and small, how we take care of ourselves, the balance of life. Everything falls into place from that self-awareness, from that self-knowing, from realizing yourself. Okay, let me see. Okay, I just flipped open. This is chapter Fear. So one thing about all the books, if you haven't read any, I basically write them the way that I would have wanted to read something when I was in the early phase of uh, self-realization, early stages of that journey, realizing that I'm on that journey. And so you're kind of, you want quick answers, not quick because they're superficial, but quick because you don't want the words to get in the way of the wisdom. And so having to kind of figure out the vocabulary in this, what I experienced as spiritual language, it was just getting in the way. I just didn't understand it. And so the way I write is very non-spiritual because it doesn't have to be. It doesn't, people get alienated and you just like, it's learning a new language and it doesn't need to be that. Just plain pedestrian English in this case. And you can say everything that needs to be said. And you'll find very quickly that you can't just because it's plain language, read through it in a breeze. No, in fact, it makes you stop after, sooner after a paragraph or even a sentence or two to really reflect on the truth of that. Not having to figure out the language, but the truth of where this sits, where this lands in one's body. So let's read the chapter Fear. It shouldn't come as a surprise that all fear comes from not being you. When in your head, confused about who you are, questioning your decisions, trying to please outside voices, and living for outcomes, it's no wonder that there's an undercurrent of fear in everything you do. You fear not getting the things you want because your future happiness depends on them. You fear losing the belongings you've attached your self-worth to. You fear abandonment by the people you rely on to feel heard, feel loved. And above all, you fear the things that could happen. You might not take a chance because you could fail. You might stay in a mediocre relationship because starting over could be worse. You might pass up on an opportunity because you could be successful. You can even fear success. As long as you're in your head, you can learn to fear anything and everything. Indeed, what you fear is often the complete opposite of your actual circumstances. You fear being lonely even though you're in a relationship. You fear not having things even though you have them. You fear not getting it all done despite having achieved so much. Every single one of us who are here today, this moment, has achieved so much by getting here, by getting through the tough spots in life, by achieving the things that we sought to achieve, and by failing and not achieving the things that we sought to achieve. It's all amazing that we're here and we're having this communication. And what's not to be so grateful for? What's not to feel like we haven't accomplished anything? On a beautiful human level, the fact that we're living life, doing these things, learning, growing, sharing is the most amazing achievement imaginable. You fear death even though you're alive. You can even fear getting healthy because being sick has become part of your identity. Most fears are not about what is in front of you, but what you imagine in your head. The rational mind is a master of irrational fears. Some people even fear the journey of self realization. They would rather not peel back the layers of stuck feelings for fear of what they might find. Of course, you can't keep a lid on your evolution forever. You're bound to look in the mirror sooner or later. And again, you can't blame anyone for anything. Everyone is at their station in life, beginning with ourselves, the acceptance of self, that we're not perfect off the bat. What does perfect even mean? And learning to settle into this journey, because it's about the journey and the outcomes happen along the way, but the focus is the journey. Then you can stop criticizing others and comparing yourself to others because you realize they're also at whatever station they're at with for their lessons and their reflection because they're living their own life in their own little world, projected world, subjective reality. And we're all learning to come out of that subjectivity, and moving into objective reality, which is presence, which is flow, which is co-creation. Even if you don't take a proactive approach to self-realization, eventually life gives you the necessary push and all your stuff comes bubbling up. You cannot escape your fears. They will hound you till you face them. You must confront them at some point, or else the accumulated suffering becomes unbearable. Fears are the most rigid, stuck feelings that keep you out of the flow and separate from your natural, fearless state. When you're in the flow, when you're in that space of the happening, being part of the happening, the co-creative process, there's no room for fear. It's just not a frequency that exists in that space. It's primarily a thing that the mind from concocts from the past and projects into the future. And the only real fear ultimately that exists is if you're staring a, a lion in the face, and that's kind of fight and flight response. You're not even going to think about that much. You're just going to do what you need to do. So there is really no fear, no real fear in the world, at least the way we experience it most of the time. Most of your journey of self-realization consists of facing your fears. Ultimately, fear is just like any other emotion. No matter how deep-seated a fear may be, you can learn to release it by observing your sensations. Literally, any fear, any stuck emotion, whatever its nature, can be released by giving it the space to complete. It's just stuck because it's been interrupted, maybe at a time when we didn't have the capacity to hold the full spectrum of it. That's okay. That's what trauma is. It happens. That's part of the journey, but it can all be released. We are not doomed to be at the mercy of some fear forever. That's so antithetical to life. It's an invitation to go deeper. That's all it is. To look within, to get to know oneself better, and to become the full person, the whole, return to the wholeness that is at the core of us. That said, if you've been pushing away certain fears for a long time, perhaps since childhood, they may be so deep that bringing them to the surface can be overwhelming. Should this be the case, don't hesitate to seek support from a mental health professional. A wide range of inspiring and cost-effective therapies continue to evolve. Keep exploring options until you find what works for you. Most important is that you take charge of your emotional well-being and that you no longer feel like a victim. Those who know the stage one, level one of the 5 levels of awareness is primarily it's that victimhood state. Poor me, why me? I'm not good enough. And we have to come around, if we want to come out of that, to take charge of things, own our emotions. And if we keep blaming them on somebody else or some circumstance, can't move on from there. That's resistance, that's denial, that's avoidance. So we got to find that acceptance so that we can start working with it. And then there are plenty of modern, great somatic techniques uh, that are non-invasive, non-pharmaceutical, non uh, intrusive energetically, but rather that work with the body's intelligence because it wants to release these things. Just have to get out of our own way. As liberating and healing as it is to release existing fears, it's equally important to keep from developing new ones. The most effective way to prevent new fears from cropping up is to be you. When you listen to your inner voice, there's no opportunity for fear to slip in. You see circumstances as they are, objective reality, and move forward by taking clear action. That's what Buddhists call this right action. That is action aligned with your conscience, where, with that resonant truth of what is right. It's not a mental decision. You know what's true for you and you don't feel threatened by the truth of others. Again, discovering the truth within yourself. You now want that for others. You want everyone to have their truth, to feel their truth, because it doesn't clash with, with what you think. You don't have to defend yourself. You want everyone to have that rock solid knowing, inner knowing. You're not lost in regrets about yesterday and have no doubts about what tomorrow may bring. You know, as long as you're being you, there's nothing to fear. You're in the best hands possible. So that's really where we start to recognize that there is a design to all of this existence. The original title, subtitle actually, To Be You, was the design of life. And, but there are other titles that, oddly enough, from my background in UX, so my previous career, for those of you who don't know, as a UX designer, design thinker, and educator for 2.5 decades. And one of the Bibles of UX design came out of Stanford University and written by David Kelly. And it was called The Design of Life, or Design Your Life, actually. And but that's what we're talking about here, is that we recognize that there's a set of rules. And believe me, I'm the last one to say, listen to the rules just blindly for no reason, but recognize them, feel their resonance, and then orient yourself in such a way that it maximizes your life experience. Who wouldn't want to do that? So there are conditions to our existence. And when we play by that playbook, then we benefit. We benefit because we are in the flow. We feel good. We're calm. We have trust in life. Our higher self guides us because we have access to that. Uh, we stop resisting our growth. Really, that's the main challenge. Is yes, there's a healthy tension. We can't just expand instantaneously. It doesn't work that way. We have to be contained a certain way, and so that we can be stable as beings. But we can expand much farther and quicker than we are if we're in constant resistance to it. But embracing the opportunities for growth as they come. And they come all the time. It could be that annoying person next to you at a cafe. Do you use that as an awareness practice? Or do you use it to practice to feel the annoyance, the resonance, and then just switch chairs or say something or whatever? Clear action, not come not coming from reactivity, not coming from blame. The words you choose and the energy you give off when you come from clear action, very different than when you come from reactivity. And if you come from reactivity, it's just going to get counter reactivity, and this is how things blow up. But if you can come from that clarity, you will not offend anybody. And if they feel offended, it's not your problem. Nothing's your problem. And you don't internalize that. That's what that means. So you can't blame yourself or blame anyone and blame anything from happening when you have that clarity. It's like, this is the clarity of what I feel called to do, not from the head, not by believing my thoughts, but from a felt truth. And even if the consequences may seem detrimental, um, maybe you're being asked to change your job, maybe a relationship, maybe moving, maybe little things like lifestyle changes, whatever it may be, and there may be some adjustment period, and the mind might go, oh, this is not so good after all. Fears may crop up, change, right? But when you're acting from that inner clarity, there's just nowhere to go to say, well, what else are we going to live from other than that inner clarity? There's nothing else to live by. So getting to that place of inner clarity is the ultimate guidance system, and you can trust that when we act from that place, whatever happens is has to happen. It contains other lessons, other growth. It's in alignment with who we are. It's reflecting back who we are, and we're moving through it in the most effective, most impactful manner. Doesn't mean we won't suffer or have, uncomfortable feelings. That's part of the journey of moving through that stuff. But the clarity is confronting yourself, being with yourself, allowing yourself to unfold without resistance, or with a minimum of resistance. True growth is uncomfortable by definition. So it's not meant to be like hurrah and all rosy colored glasses. So there is just that discomfort to growth, but it's a lot less uncomfortable when we bought in. We're in on it. We are working with it. Doing a time check here. Oh, we have more to read, more to get through. I do want to leave time for questions, but so far so good. Are we feeling connected? Yes, I see some nods. Good. Thumbs up. All right. This one, uh, Old Soul, Young Soul, is a whopper, but again, it's short chapters, 100 of the most common life situations, from birth to death and everything in between, and how a young soul experiences them and an old soul experiences them. Again, the idea is not to blame yourself or others or anything. The idea is not to become more critical and self-judgmental, but the idea is to reflect and see how every situation can be experienced in very different ways. The reality of the situation has not changed, same circumstance. But a younger soul tends to look at it through drama, through fear, through control, through victimhood. Those are young soul traits. And the moment you become aware of them, you become an old soul. That the awareness of it is the important piece. Yes, you may need to practice, have a practice, a daily, start meditating and joining retreats and all these things. But that's just once you have the awareness that you need to work on that, that's half the work. Then it's just a question of finding the right tools. It's when things are blind and unconscious and they're directing our behavior. And sometimes we make decisions from the deep down dark stuff out of avoidance or compensation and or control and lack that take up decades of our life. And why not become aware of those things sooner? You totally can. So, seeing again the same situation from an older soul perspective, where the central orientation is, well, what does it say about me? Because I'm experiencing the situation through my own lens, through my own makeup. And so, whatever my experience is me. I'm experiencing myself, my worldview, my patterns, my habits, the stuff that I don't like about myself, the stuff that is asking for change, the stuff that's asking for growth, the stuff that is presenting a development of skills. It's a it's a it's a playground of so much opportunity to become full and experience the whole spectrum. And the awareness of that is where the fullness lies, not the accumulation, not the achievements, not the I need to get to somewhere, but the wanting to be here, experiencing life to the fullest, feeling your feelings to the fullest, allowing them to rise and pass, all from a place of awareness. It leaving behind resonance that then guides us in the physical dimension where we need to do things, we should do things, we want to do things, and we're meant to do things, and we're meant to be part of the happening and the unfolding of things. That's what we're here to do, to do from awareness. And that we apply ourselves in guaranteed in the most meaningful way then, not looking at outcomes, uh, not doing things in a conditional way, not putting conditions on our relationships. I love you if you are this way or that way, or I'll feel loved if you treat me this way or that way. None of that. But that has to happen. Again, no need to blame when we find ourselves doing that. And there's a little tricky part with awareness is that it's always a step ahead. When you become, the moment you're aware of something, your awareness is ahead of your behavior. It's a step ahead of the pattern that's still there. And the pattern is a nervous system thing. So the nervous system is still reacting or judging or behaving a certain way. And but we're aware of it now, and there is frustration that can arise from that. Oh, I see my pattern so clearly now, but it's still repeating, it's still happening. Why can't I change this? Acceptance, working with it, getting chummy with it, feeling your sensations, feeling how you feel about it will move you through it. It's as simple as that. And that also is the connection to flow state, to creativity, to being part of the happening. All of that, it's all combined. It all comes together. Got to know yourself first, though. Got to love yourself first before you can love others. All right. So we have a chapter here on depression. I thought that would be interesting to read because that's something most, if not all of us, have confronted. I was deeply depressed in my late teens, and that carried over well into adult working life and so forth, on feeling like I didn't fit in this world, and just staying in that state of victimhood. And but we can all come out of that. And again, it had to happen. Everything had to happen because it was you, and you needed to look at yourself, and you needed to learn to be okay with that and accept how you feel, and that leads to the healing, and it leads to being more authentic, and it leads to being a genuine sense about yourself that then actually leads to external success. People wanting you around them, hiring you, wanting to work with you, wanting you to be on their team, wanting to collaborate. All the external flows from the internal. All right, chapter 50. This is a halfway marker here. Depression. Young soul. And I wrote this from the perspective of like when you read your horoscope, it's kind of, it has this direct style. You're going to meet the person of your life today, blah blah. So like this is the tone that it was written in. As a young soul, depression feels like something has gone terribly wrong with your mind, your body, your whole life. You don't yet know how to hold heavy energy, so you assume you're deficient or falling or failing as a human being. The idea that this mood could be meaningful hasn't entered your awareness. You believe you are the problem and that the solution must be external, a pill, a distraction, a surface level reinvention. You may try to keep going, numbing, escaping, pushing through, but when your energy is already low, even basic tasks feel burdensome. The disconnection from your inner truth, which may have been building for years, suddenly envelops you like a fog you can't lift. You don't understand why life feels flat, why what used to excite you feels so distant. But the more you try to fix your feelings, the more entangled you become in them, and the more they pull you down. At this stage of your evolution, you're still identified with your thoughts, which is what depression essentially is: the continuous belief in detrimental or demeaning thoughts about yourself or your life. When you take every thought that comes along as truth, it's hard to pull yourself up. If your mind says you're worthless, you believe it. If it says life is meaningless, you assume it's true. You haven't yet learned that thoughts are not facts, just passing interpretations that shift with your energy, hormones, and environments. You're also still deeply concerned with how others see you. You mask your pain to avoid looking weak or unstable. Your smile, function, you smile, function, perform, further deepening the inner split. The more you disconnect from how you actually feel, the more lost you become. No one told you your feelings are supposed to be a compass, not a curse. Surrounded by other young souls, you avoid depth or complain about life. Who avoid depth or complain about life. Victimhood can pin you down and prevent you from letting in some light. You absorb the idea that life is unfair and that your only options are to medicate or give up. You will stay in that dark place until you can somehow recognize that depression is a signal that points to the chronic misalignment between how you're living and who you really are. If you treat it as a wake-up call rather than a flaw, it can become one of your greatest teachers. You may even romanticize your depression, wearing it like an identity or badge that sets you apart. I did that a long time. It becomes part of how you define yourself: the one who struggles, the one who hurts, the one who can't catch a break. This mistaken this mistaken belonging keeps you tethered to the very energy that weighs you down. Only when you realize you are not your suffering, that depression is experience, not your essence, it can begin to step beyond it. And then the second part of the chapter is old soul, how old soul views depression. As an old soul, you fundamentally understand that you are not a problem that needs to be fixed, and that depression is only a messenger. It's your inner system alerting you that something is out of tune. You're being called to meet the heaviness with compassion, awareness, and stillness, to allow your energy field to realign. You don't say, I am depressed. You say, depression is moving through me. You no longer believe you feel has this is, by the way, an exercise that I recommend for everyone to do. I do it most mornings. The moment I wake up, I do a quick body scan, just a reflection on what energy is in my body. Some mornings I wake up and there's just depressed energy there. I don't know why. We don't need to. Sensation awareness is not about analyzing or casting blame. It's all about awareness. And with the awareness, with the allowing it to be, it leaves us. So whatever's there, give it a quick 30-second morning body check, body scan, and let that energy go. You get really good at it. And whatever's pent up, maybe you had a bad dream, it flushes out very quickly. Just when your awareness muscle becomes so strong that you can just let it all be. It's really that powerful. Your awareness muscle is so developed, you no longer believe how you feel has anything to do with who you are. Your awareness muscle is so developed, you can witness and release even the lowest energetic states without giving yourself over to them. It's exactly how I just described. You observe your sensations, let the energies pass, and listen for what wisdom wants to surface. That's the important piece. When you let your emotions arise and pass, experience them fully, there remains an imprint of wisdom, of insight, of guidance. That's the whole mechanism. Feel your feelings fully, and then once they're out of the way, there's a resonance that remains, and that becomes your GPS. It's really quite amazing. You know, the last thing you should do is to rush to fix or suppress your emotions. It's all about making space for them, letting them come and go. Sometimes the message is simple: more rest, cleaner food, less noise. Other times it's deeper: an identity to release, a misaligned relationship to end, a return to creativity. You no longer resist your intuition, you live by it. You know you're not your thoughts. So instead of reacting to them, you tune into your body, your breath, and your subtle inner movements. You return to what nourishes your frequency: time in nature, solitude, stillness, a kind conversation, rest. You know that a high vibration is your natural state. Our natural state is to be high vibrating. We just weigh ourselves down by attaching ourselves to thoughts, especially negative thoughts, but all thoughts, even positive ones, have a weight, and we attach ourselves to it. It weighs us down. But our when you practice this, you get a sense for how, like, our natural being is just to be high vibrating. High is actually not high. That's normal. We just pull ourselves down. So high vibration is not an exceptional state. That's our natural state. Above all, you know depression is not shameful. It's part of the human curriculum, especially for deep-feeling souls who cannot pretend life is fine when it isn't. Depression is not weakness. It's an opportunity for greater self-mastery and calibration. Everything is an opportunity for greater self-mastery and calibration. Every time you meet it with presence, something old dissolves and something more truthful emerges. Lastly, if you've seen that depression often Lastly, you've seen that depression often signals collective heaviness, not just personal imbalance. Old souls are especially porous to the grief, fear, and confusion moving through the collective field. You start to pick up from others because you're no longer so self-absorbed. You've learned to ask, what part of this is truly mine? This discernment lets you release what isn't yours while transmuting what is. In this way, depression becomes a portal, one that deepens your compassion, strengthens your sovereignty, and expands your capacity to hold the light. Yeah. So that mindset shift, using the word mindset very delicately, but language is extremely limiting. We're always pointing to something. So sometimes we just have to recognize the language itself is limiting, not get caught up on specific different definitions, but see where it's pointing to in the same way that these experiences are pointing to something. If we just say, stay at the surface definition of depression, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, this is life is meaningless, then you'll experience is that type of life. But when you can see that it's pointing to something, misalignment, it's actually asking you to align, to calibrate, to get to know yourself better, to rid yourself of the things that don't resonate. That's what it's doing. So that's a very different experience and message of it. And yes, when you're in it, it's really tough to hear that and tough to get out of it. You just got to find a way. And sensation awareness is, one of the most powerful modalities to do that. All right. So many topics, so many chapters, so many great. Just going to read a page from this one because we mentioned acceptance. So the 5 levels of awareness um, breaks down, in summary, breaks down life, all the pillars, the stations that we all have to move through in one way or another into 5 levels. It's not meant to judge yourself, oh, I'm a higher level or low level. The moment you start reading, you're realizing, oh, in this area, I'm level whatever, 3, but I've got blind spots over here, so I'm still level 1. Awareness is not a across the board kind of blanket statement. We're much more complex beings, and we may naturally be self-aware in one area and then struggle in other areas. So very quickly that idea that you're just one level dissolves, and you realize just different parts to ours to ourselves that are at different stages. But acceptance is the one thing, if I can point to anything that moves us through our healing process, that moves us through our self-realization journey, that moves us through life situations, big and small, the best, the quickest. It's acceptance, and again, it's acceptance not as a mental exercise, but as how we feel. Accepting how you feel moves us through it. It it dissolves the knot, and ideally you're in a state of acceptance to begin with, and that knot never even forms to begin with. That reaction, that unfinished emotion never takes shape to begin with. So now you're just feeling things as they arise, as they come, and you're letting them pass. And the resonance of how to act is there. And then you act by that. And then you continue. You're ready for the next moment. There's no lingering. There's no isolating one moment and amplifying it into something bigger and then staying stuck there and then missing out on life in the meantime and getting out of sync with things. The everything we seek is right in front of us. Okay, this is not the newest book, but I'll get to the latest greatest. So I'm working on my 6, so I brought 3 today for this. So I'll read this acceptance piece here just because it's important. At lower levels of awareness, the mind reacts vehemently when life doesn't happen according to plan. The idea of not getting what you want is totally unacceptable, endlessly depressing, and brings up anxiety, pressure, and desperation. I remember, my gosh, I was like, if I can't be an actor, my life is useless. If I can't be a musician, my life is doomed. If I can't pursue tennis, become a pro, then it's all for nothing. I mean, just massive identification with wanting life to happen your way. And if it doesn't happen your way, then no, you don't want to live it. um, you can look at it from in hindsight, and it's cute. When you're in it, you're in it, and it's real, but it doesn't have to be real. We can come out of that, and most of us do sooner or later. You stop clinging because it's just too hard of a way to live. It's constant resistance wears us down. Yes. Huh. All right. So, um, the idea of not getting what you want is totally unacceptable, endlessly depressing, and brings up anxiety, pressure, and desperation. You think you must push even harder and commit more resources to achieving your happiness. You categorically refuse to accept a version of life that doesn't match your expectations. Oh, expectations. Starting with level three, however, this is acceptance is the first level of the first lesson at level three. Each level has five core lessons. Um, and those who are unfamiliar with the 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 single, I've boiled it down to a single word that the five levels represent. Level one is two. That's that victimhood we talked about. Life is happening to you. Level two is because. That's when you start to see some cracks and realize that you're seeing life because of how you see it. That's how you experience it. So it's happening because of you, because of how you see things. And then level three is four. You realize, well, then if life is happening the way I see it, then I can do something about it. And ultimately, it's happening for me because it's just a mirror and it wants me to grow. So we're at level three here. And if you want to know level four and five, you'll have to read the book. So starting with level three, however, you see a direct correlation between accepting your circumstances and inner peace. You've experienced relinquishing control enough times to know that it's not the end of the world. Because that's what we always think is like, if I don't keep controlling life, that it's somehow going to go down the drain. That bad things are going to happen. And that's just not the case. The and that comes from experience, but um, it, everyone goes through these stations. The most enlightened beings went through hell to get there. Look, the Buddha, put himself through I mean, self-torture and as a modern psychiatrist, you would probably assign all kinds of conditions to a person that does those things to themselves, only to wind up in realizing that sitting under a tree is where it's at, or Jesus being in resistance to the last moment of why this was happening, trying to negotiate his way out of, do I really have to get crucified here and all that. And that acceptance of they don't know what they do is didn't happen until, so final peace at the last moment. And we're all on that type of journey. So it's okay if it's happening. That is not the problem. Get through it. It's tough enough as it is, but without us adding and amplifying unnecessarily, we'll get through it. You've experienced relinquishing control enough times to know that it's not the end of the world, that acceptance is not about giving up or giving in, and that it doesn't mean rolling over and letting life trample all over you. On the contrary, acceptance is the first essential step in getting unstuck so you can move forward. And that's what we always feel when, at least I remember reading, oh, accept. And I'm like, well, that just feels like becoming a doormat for life. And just whatever happens, and you just kind of let it happen and you don't do anything about it. No, you accept how you feel so that you can move forward, so that you don't stay stuck. And the full feeling is what gives you the insight on how to act to move forward. It's all connected. There are no disparate parts in this design of life. It all fits together. It all works together. So let's look at some of these questions here. Yeah, so in terms of sequence, if you're just starting out, start out, not just starting out, I mean, if you want, if you have some experience, that's a given, otherwise you wouldn't be here. But if you're interested in like a foundational book, the BU, The Journey of Self-Realization, is that, and it comes with a companion journal. It's got 50 chapters. You can do one chapter a week. It's a journal for an entire year. and that's the orange uh, workbook, companion book to BU. And then the uh, the more advanced version, the five levels of awareness, is I think you could graduate to that. Um, and there's no real sequence because people I hear they start at chapter three or level three of the five levels of awareness because it feels safe, and we tend to feel like we're more advanced than we are. And then we realize, oh, I have to, flip and start reading backwards. But all these books are designed to, you don't have to read them and like front to back. You can just jump in and whatever you're dealing with and read that chapter. And those chapters are typically 4, 5, 6 pages max. And five levels goes a little more in depth. But there too, it has every chapter ends with a checklist, next steps, and see if I can pull this up. So you're at, ready to graduate from level one when you can satisfy, most of these or all of these statements. So it's very practical in nature. All of it is. I think if you haven't realized yet in the way I talk, it has very little to do with um, kind of blind practice. Yes, the ancient wisdom is there, but it's meant to inform our life now. How do you live? How do you live a better life? How do you become a more well-rounded, more self-aware person? Because that's what everything flows from. You can only love others to the degree that you love yourself. You can only heal others to the degree that you've healed yourself. Um, put the oxygen mask on yourself first in the airplane before helping others. It all flows from self. And I can, from personal experience, it's all about direct experience. It's all about resonance. Uh, what we actually have felt as our truth, that's the only thing that's real. We can't really act from anything else. So if you look at everything that you believe in, and of that, what is actual direct experience that you personally have experienced, that where you have felt the resonance of it, it's a fraction of that. Most of our beliefs, most of this massive belief structure that contains all of the stories and the history and the expectations and the judgments and all that are made up. They're not real. They're not part of our direct experience. So that by itself is a huge realization. We can start letting go of most of the stuff that, a lot of it torments us. It's just thought forms. And with awareness, we no longer have to believe those thought forms. We can choose which thoughts to engage in. And even the thoughts just become a conduit at some point for higher guidance. They're not thoughts that are generated from the subconscious, the shadow side, the little human, the needs and the wants and the fear and the control and all that. That's no longer generating thoughts or as many thoughts, but rather the thoughts become a way to receive creative downloads, insights, guidance that isn't self-generated. So that is that shift from mind identified me, the self, to flow, receiving mode, co-creation, and and the journey is in between those two stations. Yes, five levels, and then the old soul, young soul is for basically meant as a glossary for all of life. And there isn't a situation in there that isn't really covered. So again, short chapters is just a lot of them, 5, 6 pages per chapter, 100 life situations, everything from Career choice, job search, high achievement, the imposter, burnout, job loss, retirement, birth, adolescence, parenting, black sheep, dating, marriage, pregnancy, infertility, parenthood, breakup, infidelity, empty nest, knowledge, planning, procrastination, expectations. I mean, just everything that we typically have to confront is in there. And so you can get the old soul, the young soul and the old soul take on that and use that to generate more awareness. And it's instant. The moment you recognize yourself in the young soul chapter, you're no longer there. And we just have to, it's part of our commitment and orientation to a life of self-inquiry. What do we spend our time on? That's what we get back. You spent years investing in an education to become good at something. Well, you invest in yourself in doing the inner work to get to know yourself better. Input equals output. There's no big secret to this. It's just spending enough time on it. And then we become wiser. And then we don't have to manifest big life situations from these unconscious patterns. And then through the manifestation, we become wiser. We can dissolve the stuck feelings and the unfinished emotions here and now before they come out as big decisions and prevent, a much longer, more complicated, more painful learning curve. And if it happens in the more painful, longer learning curve, that's okay too, because that in itself is a practice of acceptance and greater awareness. So it's all good. All roads lead to the same place. And we just have, through whatever good fortune, the opportunity when we come in touch with different teachings and different environments and different people. So much of what I do, if you've been following, is about community, being able to bring people together, because this is not the beaten path that we're taking. The mainstream life that is projected for us, that cookie cutter experiences, does not contain doing the inner work and the self reflection and self inquiry process. So we have to carve that out for ourselves, and that's what we're doing here. Yes. So if you have BU, the blue, the full version, then getting the workbook will uh, be very beneficial. It's really about continuity and ongoing engagement. As we all know, we go to these retreats and we have the spiritual high, and we meet like-minded, and we meet our tribe. And then, we go back home into usual environments. And if we don't continue the practice in some way, if we don't continue to stay connected in some way, it fades. And then, we long for that again. So having with everything, small, continuous practice, be it journaling, highly recommend that, a morning body scan. Those who have taken my longer programs, once or twice a year, we'll do a 6-week awareness online program where you have a morning practice, a midday anchor, and an evening practice, and that can help solidify this orientation or this reorientation towards seeing life as a an exercise in self-realization, and that the better we know ourselves, the better we apply ourselves. The more honest we become, the more authentic we become. These are all qualities that everyone wants, and they can sense it, even if they can't name it. But good things flow to us when we're more real, both in work, in relationships, in the way we navigate difficult situations. touch points all day long. That's real life is happening all day long in all these little situations. Talking to strangers while waiting in line, finding the moments of stillness. There's stillness between each and every breath. A little moment of stillness at the end of your in breath, at the end of your out breath. Stillness between each and every word. Pausing 3 seconds before you respond will have huge impact on the way we communicate, the way others feel heard, on the presence that you bring into situations. We're so used to talking over each other, thinking we know what they want, running what they're saying through our own filters of what we think is right, comparing, judging. Very noisy way to live, and it's unsatisfying. But letting somebody complete, giving them the space to hear themselves, what they just said, to feel honored that you're holding space for them, to be who they are without judgment. They can feel when we're running things through our own lens. But if we can actually just listen, it has a healing quality to it, extremely powerful. It will improve every relationship, work, romantic, with family members, kids, just letting them finish. If we have any questions, please either raise your hand or we can, the virtual hand, or post it in the chat. Take a look here. So, Emma, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Take some rest. I know there's different time zones that are at play here. It's very late here in Bali, but it was the best time um, for um, for the kind of global time zones. Yes, I'm working on the sixth book. Um, oh, God, book number 5 is God is a Conservative, which examines how each new generation expands and wants to throw out the old and then contracts, conserves the truth of what they found. And it's a very topical book. Um, and again, all sides are needed. Both expansion and contraction and conservation are needed. You can't just blindly inherit everything from the previous generation. You have to go out, and the universe is always testing its own limits. You can see that in DNA constantly mutating, uh, critters and nature trying out different things, see what sticks, and then conserving that which works, but coming back to a foundation with awareness of having gone on that journey. Book number 6 is End of Illusion, which was inspired by the last retreat we did in India just a couple of months ago, called End of Illusion. And it looks at yes, thank you for that reminder. It looks at the most common daily assumptions. I sometimes call them thought balloons that we live by, that dictate our decisions. And yet, if we just question them, if we just poke at these thought balloons, just these concepts, just a little bit, they pop very quickly. And we realize, oh my gosh, my whole orientation is influenced by just blindly believing this whole piece. And the subtitle is How Everyday Beliefs, Breaking the Spell of Everyday Beliefs. So looking at the most uh, the things that direct our behavior on a daily basis, trying to get very practical and how we can come out of that. So yeah, that's the upcoming book this summer. Hope to finish it. All right. Let me take another look here. All right. So if we are, a lot of this is just absorption, taking the time to sit with it. I will make a recording available, the replay available in the main group. And as always, just letting ourselves be, letting it sink in. There's an intelligence at work just from listening. I know some people like to take notes. I did that too. But very often just absorbing, not actively thinking about it, will the truth sinks in into the body, and that's where we feel things. It needs to run through the mind to a certain extent, but not too much. So with that, we'll do a closing meditation. These are meditations that are available as recordings and also during other check-ins and reminders of those who've come to our retreats. So closing our eyes and our mouth, finding a comfortable position. We're going to focus all our attention on the incoming and outgoing breath at the entrance of our nostrils. There's a sensitive area below the nostrils and above the upper lip where you can feel the touch of your breath. If you have trouble locating your breath, you may breathe slightly harder once or twice. And once you feel the touch of your breath, return to natural breath, normal breath. Let the detail of your breath pull you in closer, closer into the present moment. If your breath is shallow, let it be shallow. If your breath is deep, let it be deep. If it's more in the left nostril, let it be the left nostril. If it's more in the right nostril, let it be the right nostril. Or if it's in both nostrils, let it be both. Notice the temperature of the incoming breath. Notice the temperature of the outgoing breath. And notice if there's a difference. Notice the pace of the incoming breath. Notice the pace of the outgoing breath. And notice if there's a difference. Notice the length of the incoming breath. Notice the length of the outgoing breath. And notice if there's a difference. Notice the pause at the end of your inhale. Notice the pause at the end of your exhale. And notice if there's a difference. And whenever you find that your mind has wandered, simply notice it. And without frustration, without dismay, but with full acceptance, bring your attention back to the incoming and outgoing breath at the entrance of your nostrils. Natural breath. Normal breath. Observe your breath as it is, without wanting it to be different. And whenever you feel ready, bring your attention back to the room you're in, surface that you're sitting on, the touch of the clothes you're wearing. Gently blinking open your eyes. Noticing your environment. Noticing yourself in your environment. Noticing your peace, your presence, and your stillness. Stillness is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of consciousness, one consciousness. Thank you all for being here, for co-creating this experience. Please stay tuned for announcements of upcoming events and retreats. A lot happening on the east and west coasts of the US later this fall, but also here in Bali. Those of you who are closer in Asia. And then, of course, online sessions and YouTube postings, mindful minutes, and so forth. So appreciate you greatly. Be still, stay connected. See you next time.